Welcome to the S.M.I.L.E-ING Boys Podcast. This is a podcast that explores a public health approach to improving the mental health of Black boys while challenging the negative stereotypes often associated with this demographic in the society. This is a happiness research-informed podcast themed on the 8 pillars of happiness explored on my research trip to the top 5 happiest countries in the world. Now, isn't that cool? So welcome to the first episode of the S.M.I.L.E-ING Boys Podcast. As always, I am the host, Kay Rufai. Today's theme will be based upon one of the 8 pillars of happiness, which is going to be trust today. So before we start every episode, I'm going to explore just some key nuggets and some facts from the research that I underwent around the 8 pillars. So today we're going to just explore trust and how that kind of interplays in the work that I have done and continually do with the young boys. So trust is considered by most happiness researchers to be one of the explanations as to why some countries register a higher happiness average than others. 3 out of 4 Danish people, because this is always in the past 3-4 years, Denmark has featured in the top 10 happiest countries, and it's usually number 1 in the past 3-4 years. So that's why a lot of research is actually based upon the Danish model, which is kind of birthed the term hygge. I digress. So 3 in 5 Danish people believe that they can trust most people in their own community, their society, and their everyday lives. But to put that into context, the rest of the world, generally, globally, 1 in 5 believe that they can trust people that they live around, the community, the society. So there's a market kind of shift and change in just the the percentage of people within the population in Denmark and the rest of the world as to how they kind of connect with the term and the idea of trust or lack thereof. Okay, so today we're going to explore how trust has impacted the work that I do with young people, and in general, how that impacts the way that we navigate the world that we're living in. So as part of this session that I deliver with the young people, trust is a big part. I need to build trust with them. They need to build trust with one another to be able to explore some of the things that we are going to explore in that whole session. So one of the first things I do is I get them to really explore what does trust look like in their life and the societal context. So I kind of use prompts, visual prompts. I give them images of a series of people cross-section of people across our society, from professionals to non-professional to politicians to parents and all sorts, and musicians and other people in just popular society, and get them to explore and to pick who they will trust if push came to shove and they had to kind of depend on somebody to look out for them. And obviously, in my context, what I'm trying to explore is how race, how gender, how class really impacts the choices that they make around these characters that I've kind of projected for them. So I'm going to play you some clips that are a result of these explorations with these young boys, and then we can kind of take it and go further in from there.
He was like, he's a good person in general.
Yeah? You met him?
He was the leader of Labour.
Okay.
So, and he wanted to do good things.
Okay.
So if he was to become Prime Minister, he would have done good things for the country.
That's great.
Yeah. So the second one, Anthony Joshua.
Yeah?
I feel like he's an influential guy.
Yeah?
And I'll be able to go to him to talk about
That's great.
problems. And that's to Stormzy as well.
Yeah?
Because his music is like influential as well. Like, and he has a lot to do with like the youth of London.
That's great.
And then the person I don't trust, and I put a white officer.
Yeah? Why?
Because if I feel like they're just racist. Officers, they judge people by their skin colour.
Put Anthony Joshua, J Hus and the Queen.
Okay, why would you trust AJ?
Because like I find the way he reshaped his life inspiring.
Great.
And yeah.
And then, what was the next person?
J Hus,
Yeah, why J Hus?
because I like his messages in his songs.
Yeah.
They're influential.
Great.
He
And
speaks a lot of truth as well,
yeah,
and I think he has a lot of knowledge.
cool. And
Queen,
yeah,
like if I actually like knew her like that, I would put her down because of her power.
okay.
Yeah.
But for what she is now, do you think her power affects you or people that look like you or people that come from where you're from?
Yeah.
You think so?
I don't know because I don't follow her like that.
Right. But just because she represents power in the UK,
Yeah.
fair enough. Okay, and who would you not trust?
6ix9ine.
Why?
Because like you can't portray yourself like he did,
Mm-hmm.
like, and then do the complete opposite,
Right.
or do what you're portraying yourself as. Do what's against that. You can't do that.
The person I wouldn't trust is Sadiq Khan because he doesn't really care about youth.
Sadiq
Just
Khan?
Yeah,
Well, how do you know that?
because in like politics, he has so many chances to like fight for youth clubs, but he hasn't.
Okay, that's a very fair point.
Stormzy,
Yeah.
because he came from a bad background, I feel like he'll do his best to try like help me in a bad situation.
Okay.
And the third one's a mother because I feel like she could relate if her son was in that situation.
That's great.
So she'll sympathise and feel like to do the right thing.
That's great.
And Donald Trump, I would not trust him
Yeah.
because he's racist.
Okay, so let's kind of delve deeper into some of those clips. I'm sure some of those clips that have brought you some smirks, some smiles, some laughter, and maybe some concern to a certain degree, depends on what part of the society you fall into. But what's really interesting there is, especially the first clip, just understanding the idea of how often a lot of people make this assumption that young people are not really clued on politics and don't really know what's going on societally and who they can actually see that's really looking out for them in terms of their policies and the way that they put out their manifesto. But actually, me working consistently with young people, I'm always challenged and thinking, wow, you know that? How did you know that? You know, because sometimes it takes me forever to even really try and look through the words and the fine prints of a lot of manifestos and ideas. But a lot of these young people just pick it up in ways that's really palatable to them, which is, again, something that's really interesting about how politics is delivered in our society. And, you know, the young person that spoke about Corbyn and really understanding the ethos behind Corbyn's agenda and his manifesto and his socialist ideas and how that's really something that they connected to, and actually how he seemed like somebody they could trust from the jump. You know, that's something that's also really interesting to explore, you know, thinking that young people don't know what's happening around them. And that's obviously untrue. The more we start to realize that actually young people have ideas, they have thoughts, and they can actually decipher, for the most part, you know, what political agenda aligns with what benefits them and people that look like them. You know, until we start to look at young people like that, even though they can't vote, understanding that they still have power and voices, power and ideas, and power and thoughts. I think that's one of the biggest things, you know, when we start to think about how we can actually improve the trust between the young people and the society from a political level as well. What's really interesting about that is you know, even though, of course, Corbyn lost in a landslide loss to the Conservative Party, the point is the young people still knew what he was about. They still connected to that, and they still understood what he was really trying to fight for them and for us as a whole. So that's something, again, you can never understate that when we start to think about actually how to build trust with young people, because that trust has not disappeared. You know, they know that at least there are people like that in the community, in the political structure, within the government, that actually speak on behalf of and speak based on consultation with them and people that look like them. So let's not understate that when we start to think about how we build trust and build communities. Nothing that's really important is what he said around the idea of the white police officer, because I showed a lot of images, and in there was different people and different police officers of different races. And I said who they trust and who they not trust. And this young person in particular said he wouldn't trust a white officer. And speaking about his direct experience and people that he knows in the community that he's lived in, the relationship that has inevitably been commonplace to a lot of us around what our interactions and relationships are with police officers, especially police officers who are white, and how, all these laws, especially since, since the times of sus laws and all these reinvented ways of bringing back the same narrative and the same ideas of, stop and search and stop and account, all these different things, and how these laws have been misused disproportionately towards young people of color, and specifically young black boys. So talking about this idea that actually there's a distrust within police officers and that institution as a whole with the communities of color, especially young black boys. And in particular, when situations do happen and actually we are supposed to feel like we can trust the institution to safeguard us and to make the right decisions that would, protect us, actually, that's the last call of action. That's the last resort for young people and people of that demographic. And just actually asking the question, why? Why is that the case? The more I see, especially with things like the COVID-19 laws that have been passed, in haste, obviously because of the euphoria and fear that's surrounding it. Most people have not really actually delved deep into the nitty-gritties of what those laws are. Now police have the power to stop people if they suspect that they are, carriers of COVID-19, or if they feel like they are not staying within the restrictions of the government, which again, obviously, we know who that disproportionately affects. We know who is disproportionately targeted by that. And often that is people of color, especially black people. And how, these things are things that just slide through in our society without people actually checking, without people questioning, without people challenging the people who are in a position to put those laws and to make them come through in government. So that's another thing which really is so interesting to explore when we think about how clued on these young people are in terms of their experiences. How many young people, by average, of the age of 13 that are black have had an encounter or two with police officers? And most of the time, it's either when they're riding their bike in the park, they're hanging out with their friends, or they're in shops. I mean, there's a lot of case studies, there's a lot of research and evidence to suggest that a lot of these are unwarranted. A lot of these are based upon what's the word they like to use? I'm trying to frame it how they frame it. You fit a description, which is based upon some sort of intelligence. And often, most of the time, me included, a lot of friends and a lot of other people that I know have been stopped based on this intelligence, and ultimately nothing has been found. And they end up saying, oh, sorry, you just fit the description of who we're looking for. May I ask what this description is, sir? In most cases, it ends up just being black, right? So that's the common denominator. So therefore, this distrust that I find, especially within the demographic of young boys at the age of 13, growing up to feel like they cannot trust the institution that's supposed to protect them, that's a problem. And that's a problem, the ways that we look at how a young person grows up to be desensitized to needing to seek protection and support from an institution. They just then go about dealing with the situation themselves, which again falls into the conversation around youth violence, thinking about why is that the case. But actually, if young people don't feel like in a situation they could call up a police officer or see a white police officer turn up and actually listen to them non-biasedly, or listen to them objectively and try and put things in place to support them, not thinking they're the perpetrator instantly, and actually rough them up and put them in very uncompromising situations and end up actually framing them, then we are obviously part of the problem if as a society we actually cannot provide that space where young people can enact trust with those societies and those institutions. And now we move on to the second clip that we listened to, which was a young person talking about Anthony Joshua, talking about Jay Huss, and also talking about the Queen. And it's so interesting, where young people, especially young boys, where they go to find this male solidarity and this levels of affinity and connection, if it's missing in their everyday lives or in their primary caregivers or their societal caregivers who are supposed to be looking out for them. And thinking about who then become the people that we trust. I know for me, growing up, listening to Tupac was that for me. You know, he was somebody who was anti-society, he was angry, he was poetic, he was justified in his vilification of institutions, and he connected to me in a way that I guess nothing or most people never did. So for me, listening to these young people talk about how AJ, you know, the denominator in these things is the background that these people that they chose, that they trust, come from, not just in terms of racially, but actually lived experiences. So most of the people they've picked, like J Hus, like AJ, is because of the lived experiences that they've had and how they've been able to show in real time how they can navigate often destructive pathways in the beginning to something that is evidently positive. And obviously the fact that they are making money from that also makes them much more appealing as people they can trust. So what's really interesting when we start to think about the people that deliver and design programs for young people, and when we think about the core idea of trust, that's something that should go into the forefront of our mind, how we engage and interact with young people, thinking actually why should they trust me? What is it about my experience? What is it about who I am and how I engage with these young people that allows for me to be trustworthy? Because trust is a two-way street, right? So every time I go in and deliver workshops with young people, I am making no mistake that I don't have a given of being trusted. I need to earn that trust. And every group, every particular cohort that I work with, the first few sessions is about building trust. It's about being honest. It's about being transparent. It's about being clear and actually building that based upon respect. So that's just something that I think is really important when we navigate the society and engage with young people, is thinking about actually, why should I be trusted? What are the experiences that belie me as a person that gives them the permission not to trust me? What work do I need to do to dismantle this distrust that's already been built? That's important. And that's something that for me, the more I work with young people, it really puts me in that frame of thought every time, trying to make sure that I am somebody that is a person of my word. I'm somebody who speaks honestly and vulnerably, where they can actually connect and be honest in return. And what's really interesting is they talk about distrust, who they cannot trust, because that's also part of the prompt. We're going to touch a little bit more on that in another episode when they talk about snitching, and they talk about Tekashi 6ix9ine specifically, about somebody they wouldn't trust around the idea of snitching. So stay tuned. We will come back for that one. And then the last clip you heard was around provisions for youth centers and who they perceive to be in position to be able to make that happen, and why those people aren't doing that. So therefore, there's an element of distrust when those people stand on podiums and public platforms saying, yeah, we're for the youth, but it's like, you know, you're supposed to open up more things, but things are closing down. So it's really interesting when we start to dissect the societal participants or participatory tools to why also the society we live in, young people are at a disadvantage, because so good and well saying young people should be engaged, they should be doing other things, you know, but actually where can they go? What can they do that is outside of a school remit, that is not something that is negative, because there's not many options, you know. So therefore, you know, it's important to really question that in the society and think about that, because this young person spoke about Sadiq Khan particularly and said, you know, there's opportunities for him to have opened up youth centers, but he's not, you know, wherever he got that information from, you know, he did get it, you know, whether or not that's not the full picture, that's something that, you know, we can explore and debate. But it's just so interesting when we think about, you know, how young people can start to build things that are positively inclined in their communities, in their environments, in their places of school, if actually the people they perceive to be in the position to make those things happen for them are not seemingly making those actions happen. So when we think about building trust, it's not just about, oh, you know, don't tell lies and you don't do this. It's actually, as a society, can they trust the school that they're in? Can they trust the system that's supposed to make the best choices for them? Because that leads us into kind of where we at now in terms of the COVID-19, especially young people who are in, you know, year 10, 11, you know, about to do GCSEs, and those who are doing A-levels. There's the off-call exam grading proposal, you know, where a child's teacher decides their final grades. the GCSEs and the A level. That's an immense power to put in the hands of somebody like a teacher. I mean, I've met incredible teachers in my time. I've worked with incredible teachers in my time, but I'm also aware, as statistics and evidence shows, that there is inherent biases disproportionately towards young people of color, especially black boys. Black boys, especially of Caribbean background, are one of the most highly underperforming groups, not necessarily because they're stupid or they're dumb, but most of the time it's because of all these external factors, which we would hopefully over the series of these podcasts really get into the depths of those things, because there are so many narratives, there's so many stereotypes, there's so many unconscious biases that teachers already have. A lot of tests and series of research that expose these biases, all the way from primary all the way to higher education, and actually to put the power in the hands of people that already have unconscious biases about particular groups and having them be the ones to, in essence, control their future, because whatever schools these kids dream of going to further their life ambitions, if the teachers are the ones that are responsible for giving them the green light by saying, yeah, I predicted you're going to get 6 A's or 5 A's or whatever the new scoring system is these days, that's a dangerous thing. If we do not explore a lot about the infrastructure that is built to disproportionately disservice this demographic. Many would argue, that the education institution is very fair and it's very doesn't see color, but a lot of research would suggest otherwise. And in my personal experiences of working in the past 5 years, working closely with a lot of schools and a lot of teachers, I'm not for one suggesting that there is consciousness in these, actions or thought processes, but we need to explore the unconscious element of things, because after working with a series of boys, I end up realizing that the teachers end up seeing that, oh my God, he's getting this in school now. He's getting better at this. He's getting A's. He's getting that. I'm like, well, this is the kid that you thought should only be in isolation units. This is the kid that you thought should, be in a different provision because he's not smart enough. So it's about really understanding that all these biases already remain in a lot of people's minds, especially people who are in a position to actually make life better for young people. And it's about trying to get to the root of that and how we can really challenge ourselves. And how these unconscious biases kind of feed a lot of things that we do in our everyday lives and how we engage with different demographics of people. And we have to also take responsibility for that, because there's so many channels in which we purport a lot of these very dangerous, self-fulfilling prophecies and ideologies. But that's for a different podcast episode where we could delve further into that. So yeah, I guess for me, what today was about is really asking the question around how do we interrogate the idea of trust in our personal lives. Who are the people we trust and why do we trust those people? Do their gender, their race, their class, their age group, does that impact why we feel we can trust those people? Our previous experiences navigating the decisions and the thought processes around that. And actually then when we come through that thought process, then we should think about the demographic of young people and why they trust or not trust particular groups, and what can we do as an institution, as an individual, to start to break down these barriers of distrust, because it's a big thing, it's a very important thing, and that's something that I think we should hold dear in our mind. I'm going to share some other anecdotal insight around trust for us to really kind of sink our teeth into. So there's something really interesting that I explored when I was in Denmark, and this is something that's been researched at great length. In Denmark, there are places where there are just food stalls, like food truck things or fruit trucks, and the prices are written on the outside, and you just go, you pick what you want, and then you go and pay for it, or you look for the person that you can pay to in the area. So it's not a manned stall, and that was mind-blowing to me, just thinking I could just pick this and maybe pay or maybe not pay. That's crazy. That's a level of trust as a society that impacts the level of happiness that we eventually see, because trust and happiness are strongly linked, and there's a lot of evidence and statistics around that through the research piece that I did, and also a lot of research that's been done years and years ago. So there might be some links that I might add to the YouTube page just for your own kind of perusal if you feel to delve further. So that's really interesting. Another thing is there was a research piece that was commissioned in a lot of European countries and America, where there was a wallet that contained all the documents necessary for you to locate who the owner of the wallet is. There was money in this wallet, and this wallet was dropped in a lot of different cities across Europe and in the USA. Do we know which cities the wallets turned up to the owner with the money in it? Definitely not London, I'll let you know that much. But what's really interesting is most cities across Europe, in some capacity, the wallets might have been returned, but not with the money. And definitely not in London, the wallet didn't even show up. But in Denmark, and I think Denmark specifically, some cities in Denmark, all of the contents of the wallet turned up to the owner with the money and the documents. And that's super interesting, again, when we think about the levels of trust that a society has been able to kind of create, which enables the citizens to start to navigate feeling like, oh, they could trust the person next door, the person down the street, the person in the school, the person in the police uniform, because as a society, the ethos of trust is something that is super ingrained. So that was something that was super fascinating for me, just thinking about that and trying to explore a London city that's built in trust, where I can just drop my wallet and think, Sally down the street is going to bring that wallet to my house because my address is in there, even though I just put like £500 in the wallet. Should I try that out? I'll keep you updated. So for today, that's been the trust episode. Hopefully there were some nuggets for you to kind of introspect, to think about how you can enact in your everyday life, and also how to look outwardly towards the group of young people that we speak of, and how actually you can be part of the change that allows for trust to grow in the community. Thank you for listening, tuning in to the S.M.I.L.E.ING Boys Podcast. I've been the host, and this has been the first episode, and it's been super exciting. I look forward to hearing your thoughts, so please share, comment, like, rate, subscribe, all the things that you got to do to make this a thing consistently, so more people hear about it, so more young people feel empowered by listening to or watching something that actually speaks to and about them. Thank you for joining in today, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.